On this episode of American Travelers, we visit Lake Powell near Page, Arizona, then check out Antelope Canyon and the beautiful Grand Canyon, then Monument Valley and Utah's Zion and Bryce National Parks.
We travel the world looking for fun and new adventures. I'm Kari.
I'm Dave.
We made it.
Welcome to American Travelers.
Dave grew up as a professional drummer before he went into the video production world as a sound mixer.
Kari followed her mother's footsteps as a nurse. She loves distance running and even finished 2 100-mile races.
Our purpose is to show awesome destinations and share our new adventures. We've got a bunch of great stops to show you,
We'll give some tips on how to budget your trip.
along with some history and culture of each destination.
So come join us on American Travelers.
Welcome to the Southwest.
On this episode, we're driving with our travel trailer, and our first stop is Lake Powell near Page, Arizona. We're staying at the Waweep RV campgrounds. We have an awesome view of Lake Powell right from our RV. Since we're dry camping, that means no hookups. We have to put water in the tank. So I'm gonna get a hose out of here that's a drinking hose, and we're gonna fill up our tank. And guess what these are for? That's for what they call the black and gray water, because it's, number 2 hose. You don't want to be touching that with your hands. Okay, I'm gonna hold it in there. And voila, water.
Dave's fairly new at backing up our trailer.
Okay, we're gonna attempt this. It's the backing up. You turn the wheel the opposite way you want to go. So if we want to go that way, we got to turn the wheel this way. It's the weirdest thing. There we go. Okay, why don't you get wide shot? I think that looks pretty good. I don't want to have to disconnect the truck. Well, what are we doing, Kari?
We're going to have salmon, cilantro, lime salmon tonight, and put it in a foil boat. Yeah, we'll put it kind of on the end here.
Yeah. We decided to take day trips to our destinations so we don't have to haul our trailer.
We're headed up the hill. We're going to go look at Horseshoe Bend. That's the curve in the Colorado River. This is a fantastic view right here. To see it, unbelievable. Now we're heading to take a boat tour in Antelope Canyon, which was created through water erosion from flash flooding.
Today we're on our boat tour and we're pulling out the big camera for this because it's going to be beautiful.
Life jackets are located both sides of the boat underneath the seats. There is also a placard up here that also shows you how the life jacket goes on. So as the boat is sinking, you can be there reading that wall there.
Our tour guide is very knowledgeable about the history of this canyon and quite a jokester at times as well. This is a must-see when coming to the Southwest.
Antelope Canyon was a dry canyon before the lake was here. The Colorado River ran just outside Antelope Canyon there and carved the main channel out there in the Grand Canyon deeper.
The tour we're on is about an hour long. The canyon walls have so many different shades of red. We even see some dogs out here having fun.
All right, thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You guys enjoy your vacation again. Goodbye.
Thank you,
Goodbye,
Mom.
folks. Thank you very much.
My name is Clarence Aldridge. I oversee all of the tour operations here at Antelope Point Marina, as well as the private charters on Lake Powell.
We just took a fantastic tour, scenery gorgeous. Tell
Good.
me a little bit more about this place.
Sure, yeah, Antelope Point Marina is a full-service marina. Lake Powell is, as you know, a very, very beautiful place. It's 186 miles long. There's almost 2,000 miles of shoreline, so it's a massive, massive place with, lots of canyons and a lot of beautiful landscape and scenery. So it's a great place for travelers and people on vacation to get out and explore. Here at Antelope Point Marina, we offer, boat tours similar to the one that you just went on, private charters out on the lake. We rent houseboats. We rent smaller ski boats so that you can go and enjoy the lake yourself.
Coming up, we visit the Grand Canyon and Monument Valley, famous for the filming of classic Western movies.
It's off on another day trip to the south entrance of the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon is one of the most awe-inspiring places to travel to. People travel from all over the world just to come see this place. You can travel to different points along the canyon and get a totally different experience wherever you are.
Check this out. We see these people that climb down to this ledge. It looks a little scary to me.
At another section of the park, we run across these hikers.
Tell me a little bit about your experience, what you did today.
Okay, it was a humbling experience. We do a lot on the Appalachian Trail, and this is beautiful but hard.
We're at the Grandview Lookout. We hiked down to Horseshoe Mesa, I guess about 5 miles down there. Once we got down to Horseshoe Mesa, we got a camping ground, and then past that, you got to take a little jaunt kind of off a side trail, and they've got some caves in there. We crawled through those. I mean, they kept going and going. Finally, we just gave up before we got lost. So tell me about the hike back. The hike back was, I mean, first of all, never been to Grand Canyon before. Absolutely gorgeous. Every time we'd turn a corner, I mean, the expanse would open up and it was bigger and more beautiful every time. Going back, I mean, it was downhill going there, and that was, I mean, a little tough on your toes, but easy, comparatively speaking. I mean, it was the hike back. I mean, literally 45, 80 degree up for the last 2 miles. Y'all found dust coming back up here as my buddy collapsed into the dust over here.
We're happy to be alive.
Yeah. Hey, Mom, if you happen to see this, I love you. I'm alive. Our next day trip is to Monument Valley, where we're visiting Gouldings Trading Post and Lodge. It was built in 1924. A lot of classic Western movies were filmed here.
Mr. and Mrs. Goulding came here in the 1920s. They saw a need for a trading post out here, and the Navajos gave them permission to set up trading post here. So the trading post is downstairs and their living quarters are up here.
Many filmmakers and movie stars came here to film, as the massive outcroppings and desert backgrounds were one of a kind. John Wayne filmed here and even had his own private cabin. Let's hope the crew had some decent digs as well.
We jump into this tour bus to take a closer look. All we can say is that these pinnacles of rock are magnificent. So you can rent a little time with the horse and get your picture taken on a point out there, and it's just like an old Western.
Our tour takes us through a 17-mile valley that have outstanding views of these sandstone masterpieces that tower as high as 1,000 feet. This is really pretty out here. It's dusty and very Western. Coming up, we check out Hurricane Utah's museum, where we learn the history of pioneers moving west, then head over to Zion National Park.
We leave Lake Powell and now going on to Zion National Park. We're stopping at Hurricane Utah along the way.
We're at the Pioneer Heritage Museum in Hurricane, Utah. It's a museum that is all about the struggle the pioneers had to get water here. There's no water up in this bench area, so they had to bring it up out of the Virgin River. It took them 12 years to dig a canal by hand to get it up here, and it was quite a feat. And so this museum is all about the pioneer struggle to settle this valley. I'm a miniature wagon maker. I make these scale model wagons. I do it from scratch. Everything's made by hand, and they're all made out of hardwood, and they're all made to a 1/8 scale. And these wagons go clear back to the Roman chariot time, and that's what kind of set the gauge on the wheel for the width of the wheels. And that's what decided our gauge on our railroads. In fact, our automobiles today have the same wheelbase as most of these old wagons did. The wheelbase is the width of the wheel from one side to the other, not the length from the front to the back. Well, after the horse-drawn vehicles, when the motorized vehicles come along, they took on a lot of the same traits and a lot of the the sayings like the front of the wagon is called a dashboard, whereas nowadays we have a CD player, a speedometer, and all that. Back then, the dashboard's main use was to keep the horses from dashing mud on you. This is my favorite wagon. I build more of these and I sell more of these than any wagons I've got. This here is a typical chuck wagon. They was made typically on a farm wagon or an old military wagon. And this is all this down here is called the gears of a wagon. You got the reach in here that determines the length of the wheels. You can spread them out just like a modern day semi. You can shorten them up with this reach. And this box is a 10'6" long, and this is the old lazy back seat. When this first come out, that was just like the truckers today that have them easy ride seats. Because at first they didn't have these springs on them. There's 27 parts in this wheel. This here would be like a rim, but there's 7 segments in here and they're called felloes. And there's 14 spokes and they run into here on a 3% dish. And that allows, when the horses jog along with the wagon, they have a tendency to sway the wagon back and forth. If this didn't have the 3% dish, this wheel would collapse. And here's the brake assembly. The way this brake is designed, you pull it here and put it into a notch. It runs down here and runs this, and it puts these blocks up against the wheel and stops the wheel. Now the horse collar is a whole nother story, but it's pulled by these single trees where their trace lines come back. Some call them tugs. They come back and hook onto here, and these chains are called stay chains. And that's so they can make this double tree even, because you'll always have one horse that's a little faster than the other one, so you want to hold him back, and that makes the other horse work a little harder because he wants to be up with the other one. And these here are called hounds that hold the tongue together and everything. There's a rod through here. I don't have it hooked up now, but there's a rod through here that holds this on. So in the movies, when you see them pull this off and the horses run away with the wagon and the tongue, that's a myth. If you pulled this off, the horses would run into these stay chains and they would pull this off, the tongue would hit the ground, and of course we'd have a wreck. This is the cowboy kitchen. You got your drawers here for your supplies and your pots and pans, and they would always have a meat saw here. Sometimes they would have a canvas under here or a piece of elk hide or something they called a possum belly. And the camp helper, as they would ride along, he would jump off and fill this up with buffalo chips, pieces of wood and everything, so when they got to where they was going, they'd have their firewood. The chuck wagon didn't really go right along with the cattle. They would go out in front of the cattle with a scout looking for water and a place to camp and bed the cattle down and get dinner ready. By the time the cowboys got there, they'd be hungry and all they wanted to do was just eat and go to sleep. This is the Silver Eagle of the 1800s. This Concord stage right here was made in New Hampshire, and it was the most popular stage. This is what makes the coach bounce, is these through braces here, and these through straps, these leather straps would allow the coach to have some suspension in it. And according to Mark Twain, this seat right over here was the most comfortable one to ride in because it rode with the smoothest, because the driver would sit right here with his foot on the brake. His shotgun man would sit here, and these would haul typically 6 people inside of there. Now they're only a little over 4 feet on the inside wide, so the people would be kind of cramped up in there, and a lot of them, they had seats up here with a footrest down here so they could put 3 people up here and the same right here. And this here is a sheep wagon that the sheep herders would use. This is their home away from home. They would live in this wagon. This is for storing feed for your animals, your saddle horses. And this is storage here where you'd store your gear up under the bed. There's a bed right in here. Up in the corner, there's a little metal stove where they would bake their biscuits and their cobblers and fry their mutton on top of the stove. This aqua wagon you see back here This is a typical immigrant wagon that the pioneers come from back east, across the plains in, and it has the oxen on it. And the oxen can pull a big load, but they couldn't go very fast. The yoke around their neck, they couldn't put that on a horse because it stopped the horse from breathing. The coolest thing that come along is when they invented the horse collar in China. That allowed the horse to breathe, and it was more like they would push on their chest right here. They would push the wagon as to pull it, and the rear end of the horse, the hind quarters, was able to push, and they get the full use out of the horse, and they got 50% more power, and they get 50% more of the work done. And this cake here is one of our featured items. It's on the internet as a must-see. People come from Europe and all over to see this cake. It's 110 years old. It's the top part of a wedding cake. It's a fruit cake. And if you'll notice right behind the cake or to the side, there's the bride and the groom. And they took this cake and kind of kept it like traditionally you would, but they didn't eat it. And it sat on a shelf. And the great-grandson come in this winter and told me the whole story about this cake and who the people was and who his mother was. And the little girl in this picture is actually his mother's mother. So he said when he was a little child here in Hurricane, when they'd go to the house, they couldn't touch this cake. It was on display.
Coming up, we visit the beautiful Zion and Bryce National Parks.
We're pulling into another RV park about 3 miles from Zion. This will be our home camp for both Zion and Bryce, as it is easier to travel with just our truck.
The landscape is pretty flat where our camp is, but as we start to climb, the mountains become very rich in color and size. We see this cool stone house on the way.
We finally reached the entrance of Zion and ready for some great hikes in the park. Looks like we're not the only ones, as there are cars parked along the road. You have to hike to the shuttle because you can't drive right in through the park. So you hike to the shuttle point and then they'll take you into the park. We may not make this shuttle, but we'll make the next one.
Zion National Park has become so popular that park officials decided to have all tourists take buses. It actually works out pretty nice as they have enough buses throughout the day.
We started at Zion Lodge and we're taking the trail up to Emerald Pools. Our hike is pretty easy and the views are spectacular.
Did you know that Zion became a national park in the year 1919? And the name Zion is ancient Hebrew for sanctuary or refuge. Another interesting fact is that Zion National Park is 229 square miles.
We're coming to the lower Emerald Falls right now.
Another hike here at the Zion National Park is the Riverwalk, which is at the Temple of Sinawava.
These cliffs are so high and so sheer. Pretty amazing. Along the trail, we run into our little buddy who's eating a treat.
Yeah, this is nice.
We hiked up this trail, and this is the beginning of the Narrows.
The Narrows hike is one of the most difficult hikes within the park, as after the path ends, you're walking through the river, and at certain times of the year it can have a lot of current.
Our next day trip is to Bryce Canyon. We drive through Bryce Canyon City to get there.
Another must-see in the Southwest is Bryce Canyon. Bryce is known for its crimson-colored hoodoos. As you can see, this is one awesome view. They say the best viewing times are around sunrise and sunset, but we're loving it now. We took a hike to the highest level of Inspiration Point.
So the trek up to Inspiration Point is a little over a mile long and worth the climb. Dave's already set up and ready to film when I get there.
One thing nice about this tripod, it's a Sockler, is it has a bubble on it, tells you when you're even, and that way whenever I do a pan, it's nice and smooth and the skyline stays very level.
Here's what it looks like when using a tripod.
We head back down to the truck and take off to our base camp at the RV park in Springdale. Well, our Southwest trip is finally over and we're heading back to California. After seeing all these great places, Nevada is looking pretty bare. Nevada has its own charm though if you like wide open spaces. So we're getting close to home. We're in Reno, which is about 2 hours away, maybe a little less, and filling up with gas. And you can tell by looking at this truck, we've been on the road for a while.
So over the Sierra Mountains we go. It's springtime and there's plenty of snow that will last clear into July or August.
We had a fantastic time exploring the Great Southwest, and we would highly recommend this trip to any fellow travelers.
Thanks for watching American Travelers.